Yeah, that's why I'm like pretty calm about all this stuff, is because it's always we get told all of it, and then the whole game of life is like, so how do you react to it? What can you control? How do you react? You know, let's say there is cloud manipulation, or there is weather manipulation, or people are trying to short your area. Like, let's say there's a financial grabble happening, and you're being shorted. You know, let's say our biometrics are the new signature for securities. Like, let's just say hypothetically. How does that change anything? It just means you have to live cleaner, have a better community, be more resilient, and get stronger. Like, every time there's an obstacle, it's either break or get stronger. And like, when you have that mentality, that's how you can understand that, you know, the devil don't make you do it. It's like it's like if you're in this realm and you're allowed to be grappled like that, and you believe in a benevolent creator, how is that possible? And I think it's because, just like some childhood traumas give you skills and charisma, it's the same with this stuff. It's like, how do you react? Do you break? Do you get envious and try and hurt other people and wicked, or do you get stronger? You know, and all that milk and stuff I was telling you guys about, that was because I wouldn't accept the mask. I'd still be drinking burnt milk right now if it wasn't for that. I still wouldn't have all these great metaphors I see all the time. Like, now we're making soil with the manure, and we've met all these great people, and it really is just like going on the ride and just accepting it.
Yeah, I think it's great. And burnt milk, that's how we should rebrand pasteurized milk.
Yeah.
I don't want to drink burnt milk.
Right.
So I keep, one thing I do also want to urge people all the time on the show is to be skeptical of their skepticism. And going back to me being a catastrophist, you know, it's easy to fall victim to a lot of things we see online, because it's so easy to buy into things if it confirms any bias you have against certain institutions, which is going to lead me into your response to the FEMA response, because it's very easy for me. I'm like, oh, of course they're ruining this. But, you know, you had a very different take, and I was curious if you could share that with us and why you think that.
Yeah, I went through the whole thing that FEMA's going to put us in camps, and the Walmarts or Jade Helm and the coffins and all that. So, you know, I've been at this a while, and I really looked into FEMA, and I know a guy that was doing like he was moving bodies after Katrina. It's like, I know people that have been in FEMA, and FEMA is underfunded, understaffed, and they sometimes have horrible communication networks with local law enforcement, which does happen. They have no guns, they have no enforcement at all. They're not great, you know. And I used to tell people that would freak out about FEMA camps. They're like, oh, they're going to put us in FEMA camps. I'm like, then don't go to the FEMA camp. You want to know how you avoid a FEMA camp? You don't need food. and it kind of blew people's minds. I was like, the best way to avoid a FEMA camp is you turn away from it, and you don't knock on the door begging to come in, because what really happens, and there's been very controversial events in the past that I won't get into, but when people talk about atrocities at camps, they start off as providing for people that are dependent and if supply chain is broken. So the urban dependent. So it's like, okay, everything's gone to hell. We're in flood waters. We have no food. We have no blankets. We're freezing. What do we do? Go into the camp. Here's your meals. Okay, the food starts going down. You start being ridden harder for labor. Criminality breaks out, blah, 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 corruption. But it all stems from dependence. And so as a farmer, as someone who looks at the world like a permaculture, farm, you look at the root, you look at what starts the dominoes. And so for a FEMA camp, it's dependence. And so even without any intent against anyone, the Superdome and New Orleans became horrifying.
Yeah.
During Katrina, but it wasn't because FEMA was like sadistically experimenting on people. They couldn't provide. It was underfunded. And so NASA gets more money a year than FEMA. NASA, is not going to the moon for 60 years, gets you more money than all the natural disasters in all of America. And then people say, well, they're paying migrants. All your money is going to migrants. And then I say, it's because of food, right? So let's say 99% of America relies completely, all of their food, on these giant farms that are less than 0.5%. And those giant farms have no labor. That's actually a disaster. And so that's why I encourage people. And then they're like, oh, so you like mass migration? I'm like, dude, I grow my food for this reason. Like, I have 4 sons for this reason.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be replaced. I don't want someone else to pick my berries.
Right.
So it's like, a lot of times people like to offload because they don't want to do simple tasks, like have a child, be up in the middle of the night when they cry, or like wake up every morning and making sure everything's covered and the frost didn't kill this and the deer didn't kill this and this is watered and you have calcium in the soil and, you know. And so if you do that, then there isn't a disaster. There isn't a need for migrants. There isn't that. And so my view of FEMA is they say, oh, they're turning people away. And I looked into this a lot. And a lot of times, because up here we have horrible wildfires where I live. You know, like I know people whose houses have been incinerated in 5 minutes. Like I know, like this area, because sometimes people say, oh, imagine if you were in a disaster. Imagine. I'm like, dude, we have a whole season where we have to put wet rags under our doors because you can't see more than 30 feet, like because of fires.
Right.
So, you know, people are watering their houses so they don't catch on fire. So I'm like, dude, everywhere has this stuff. So anyway, so when there's an active disaster going on, a lot of times local law enforcement will keep people away from that because the liability of death is so high, unless you're on a team, like unless you're like a volunteer firefighter, all stuff like that, then you can go. And so a lot of times it's about communication. So what I could see happening is FEMA is like, oh yeah, the airspace is shut down around this area because we have no ability of going in to get you. And then you have another law enforcement agency says, no, we should be able to do that. And they have that disagreement. And then someone makes a TikTok video and it doesn't capture it at all. And I think that that's doing a lot more harm than good because, you know, show me a video where a FEMA person held a gun to someone and you can still go. Like you can, if you feel the real need to get in there, you can go. And the people I know currently in the flood are saying that locals are helping each other. It's a lot better than people are saying. That the doom and gloom is like selling clicks and you know pills and all this stuff. There's like an entire industry around like getting people terrified. Like, oh, I'm a truck driver. I've never seen anything like this. They're killing the pigs and eating. And you're like, okay, because I always follow up on that stuff a year later. I'm that guy.
Right.
I do. Like there was this thing in Idaho where the government was shutting off the water to all the farms, and you'd see all these TikTok videos of like, man, I've been farming for 40 years, and the government, we're all going to starve. And then you actually look into it, and it was a contract that the farmers had with the government. They exceeded the amount of water. The government said, don't do that because the aquifer was getting drained. And then the government gave them the water.
Right.
Like that's the actual story, but then you don't get to sell your like male vitality pills. And I'm like, people suffer for this stuff, you know? And that's why I just focus on what I can do. No 10 people within 10 miles. We created the Bertarium map so that like in an event of a disaster, you know your neighbors, you know who you can trust, you have a history. I try to make comedy that lightens the load of family stress, you know, where people can laugh together, they can offload stress, so there's less divorce, less fighting. And that's my part I'm doing. And so the idea that just scaring the shit out of a bunch of people that can't do anything about it, they're just sitting in it, you know, it's like, I just think that's not effective at all.
We'll be right back. This is a word from our sponsors at the male vitality pills. No, but you're so right. You're so right though, because I talk about a lot with the inverted world. That's a lot of the stuff that people, it's real atrocities and horrible things that have happened in the world. But it's also being aware that there's forces that look to like control your perception, right? So like when you're talking about,
absolutely,
looking into things a year later, it's funny, but that's what you do. That's to me, that's the simulation, is the thing you buy into. So if you buy into that TikTok video that went viral, that scared you, but you don't, but that becomes kind of like your fear religion. You don't go back and check up on it, but you got to go back and check in on these things, because once you're in those situations, you see it happen all the time.
Did you want to hear a wacky one?
Oh yeah.
About perception and fear and what can actually, this may come across as cynical. I'm not cynical. I'm very hopeful. I love people. I'm full of love and heart and all that. But okay, I don't know. Oh, this is going to rub people. All right. Take for example a certain attack that just started happening right before a certain holiday. And I was talking to one of my buddies as a J, and he was like, it's kind of funny how they have us in synagogues now for like 2 weeks, just sitting here donating to this thing that happened to just happen. I think donation capitalism is so much crazier than people even want to believe. And I started looking into certain events with I know that there's terms and conditions. So certain events where a boom boom stick took someone's ability to, I don't know, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Events.
Yep.
Immediately donation page before it even happens, bang, right?
Yes.
And they'll just get all this cash. And so sometimes I think some of these events are twisted into this fear thing to get like billions of dollars out of people, like billions and billions. And I'll sometimes see these events now, and because I knew one of these high level right-wing grabblers in media, and I won't say who it is, but he was like, if you show a crying child, they give you everything. And I'm like, dude. And it's like, yeah, get a child crying.
Good.
And
God.
so that emotional vampirism, because you're looking at these.
That's what I was going to call it. Yeah,
that's
that's so.
Something like this, I bring it up, and someone's like, "Oh, so you're saying the child didn't die?" And I'm like, "Dude, I can't even get through because that self-righteousness kicks in, and they're like, so you're denying the." I know friends that were in the military, and they call it a fireworks display. They say we do a fireworks display, and we sell a ton of weapons.
Wow.
And I know that sounds cynical, but you're like, look at this country attacking this country, and you see all these like rockets, and you might as well be playing, like a song to it, like Queen or something, like it's 4th of July.
Right.
And then you look up like death toll, and it's like none, and you're like, so what happened to all of them? They're like, what do you mean? They just it's like Space Invaders, and then they're like, do you love your people? Give us money. They're coming for you. They're gonna give you the hard R.
Right. Well, the Patriot Act was a good example of that,
What is?
The Patriot Act and people, after 9/11 and buying into that fear, which I get it. I was right around there when it happened, but I see, for me, I started really for recent events, speaking of bombs, it was when they said Israel bombed a hospital and everyone was up in arms for that one night. I'm sure there was a ton of scams out there for donation vampires, but the next day they didn't hit the hospital, right? And so we started seeing this thing, where I keep calling it simulation or post-reality, where it's like you don't know what's real anymore, especially with AI now. You could be tricked, and they take advantage of you and your good heart. A lot of people just have a good heart, and they feel bad. I feel bad. I feel bad for the people in North Carolina. I feel bad for all these people, but you cannot buy into it. That's why you kind of have to be skeptical while also trying to not be jaded. It's a really weird line to walk.
Yeah, when I cracked the Bono stuff, when I was still out on YouTube, I had this video that got millions of hits. It was called Bono is Evil. And it was just breaking down his charity, how he keeps 99% of it and the rest goes nowhere. So I started realizing these charities are either fronts, like Ashton Kutcher's anti-sex trafficking charity called Thorn.
Yeah.
Okay, like they did with Danny Masterson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I again, I'm a doer. I'm a just do it guy. So I'm like set up networks where people and then you can directly support them. Like my friend, I'd rather give $1,000 to someone I know whose house burned down than $50 to an NGO that goes nowhere 1,000 times. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? It's like, no, I know him. I've met him. I will help him now. Me and my wife have this network like that where it's like, oh, this person is in it having a problem. This person is selling their product. This person, and then when you have a community of trust, and that's why trust is so important, then you can actually help each other. And that's how we did this special. It's like people know me, they know my character, and so they'll buy a ticket for like $400 so that we can put it into the land and then the expenses, and then they can actually see this special happen outside of, because I was banned from every theater, every theater I was banned from.
Wow.
And so what do? Do you quit? And so we did a community thing where we actually had the people who like the comedy fund it, and then we followed through, we did it, we got it out, and this is our 3rd time doing it, and it's like, that's how the community actually comes together. And entertainment is part of culture, and it's very important. And so, but do that with everything. Do that when you have your friend that is selling a half a cow. This friend is doing this. Like my friend, classical learner, who's got a homeschool network that I always promote. And that's how you actually get out of it. And so you set up these like actual communities, not symbols and runes, oh, this symbol makes you feel this way because of this branding, like the swoosh.
Right.
And then you just give your energy to it versus like people, And so I've set up networks like that, and it's very important to be generous. I try to give away at least 10% of everything I make, but I never do it to a GoFundMe. Like, to do a GoFundMe to get the land to do my special, I was kicked off in 2 hours. You can GoFundMe an 8-year-old sex transition.
Wow.
Like 2 hours, they're like, you're out of here, because I'm actually competitive. Like,
right.
I actually, can build something outside of the Hollywood machine. And you're right, there's a lot of good people that are just being led badly.
Yeah.
And so if you have higher quality comedy, you have higher quality entertainment that shows intact families. Think about how few families there are in all of entertainment, including YouTube, including everything, that are just functional. It's always dysfunctional. It's always drunk. It's always cheating. It's always this. And a lot of people, a lot of good guys, they mimic, or they just are influenced by what they're watching. And so that's why I've always included my family in all this stuff.